There are a lot of unknowns still that I think you in particular are doing a very wonderful job of trying to get going with this whole traffic calming and involving the public. And I understand from that the first meetings have gone very well and there are many to go. And what will ultimately be recommended by that transportation subcommittee, then the Transportation Commission, and to be followed by all the public input is still brings us out to late end of January, as I understand it. The actual cost of the bridge is an unknown, of course, because we don't have the bids out yet. One of my questions is, when was the initial cost estimate completed? You referenced that there is a cost estimate based on the precast. When was that done?
There were a couple of cost estimates done for different options, different types of bridges in this location, and I believe they were generally done about midwinter last year, if I remember correctly. Okay. And then ultimately those were the numbers that were carried forward into the budget process.
I wonder if we could assume about a 10% increase on what that cost would be now, based on that 10% increase being projected for other types of projects, coming later in the agenda. So that's one factor that I think could affect the final cost that we don't know yet because we don't have the bids. I'm concerned that we could be in a situation where once this traffic calming procedure is done and finalized, we find out the cost, we find out the actual cost of the bridge. It's possible that it may not be within the budget of the $580,000. And I might suggest consideration or discussion of separating the tasks into two sections, tasks 1 through 3, which, even if it were determined that we don't have it in the budget to do the whole project at once, which I think is what we need to do, those tasks could be completed. We could have the design, we could have the recommendations. That information would not really have an expiration date. It would be useful if the project had to be postponed, if that was determined at some point, depending on the budget and the cost. Could tasks 4 through 6, if it turned out that by the end of January and we find out what all these costs are and the bid on the bridge, which would be well before the April date that tasks 1 through 3 are completed, if it were to be determined that we can't go forward with tasks 4 through 6 right now, would you just make a change order to cancel those tasks within this contract? Can they be separated into two? Could we approve tasks 1 through 3 and not 4 through 6 until we have more information?
Okay. If I may, I think I heard 4 questions
I know.
there, so I'll try to capture all of them. In the way that we process projects, for pretty much all of them that we do, there's always the inherent challenge of knowing what the final cost is going to be. Mm-hmm. And yes, we see price escalation from year to year. It varies, and some years it goes way up, some years it goes up a little bit. So we're very conscious of that when we're doing cost estimating for projects, and there's usually a contingency percentage. It ranges anywhere from 10 to as much as 20, 25%, depending on how far out you're looking, added to the estimated cost of the project. So there was a contingency in the numbers that drove then ultimately the budget that we have today. We won't really know, honestly, until the bids come in as to whether or not the estimate was correct or the updated construction engineer's estimate when we complete the design is correct. So that's the thing that, until bid day, until we open those envelopes, we don't know for sure, because it really depends on how many contractors are looking at it, the time of year, how hungry they are, how many jobs they have, the cost of concrete at that particular given time, the cost of steel. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So we do the best we can. We do this every year, and we do this with all our projects where we're estimating what we think it's going to be. We put in the contingencies. Most of the time we hit pretty well. Every once in a while we get one that just blows up. The council will then ultimately make that decision about, okay, do we proceed if we've got a higher than anticipated cost, whether it's within the budget or not, or do we repackage it in some way and rebid it? Do we postpone it? Do we just make it go away? All of those have happened at different times throughout the years. So that's the first part. In terms of the structure of the contract, as I mentioned, it's a time and materials not to exceed. So we could start the project and then a weekend say, we've changed our mind, we're going to stop, we'll pay you for the time that you've expended, and we're done. Right? So that makes it pretty easy when it comes to your thought about could we split these. Okay. Essentially, we work our way through these tasks, and if we reach a point where we say, yes, we've gone through design, or even if we've gone through preliminary design, and some reason we come back and say, guess what, our numbers were just completely wrong, and it's 3 times the price, and we're just going to stop and regroup, then you stop, the contract doesn't pay out anymore, and you're done. Okay. I don't think that'll happen. Typically, we've not had that experience. But, if for some reason something came up that caused us to have to stop somewhere along the way, we just pay out the services we've expended to that point and we're done. And that's why on the construction management side, we can very easily say, this is the estimated time, but the more staff time we can put into it, the less of their time we need. We then don't pay them for what's in here because they're not actually expending time.
Other discussion.
There was another question there, but I think I've lost it.
Well, no, I think I may have asked the same question in a couple different ways, and you answered. And I think that the timing before we would even get to those other tasks, we would have the answers to a lot of those unknowns that I was referring to.
Yeah, that's and to some extent that is true in that we'll go through the selection process, and again, as I mentioned, that preliminary assessment of different types. Part of that's going to be looking at the cost. Right, which, based on, general estimates and experience of projects built in recent years that the contractor's seen or contractors have seen or our consultant has seen or we have seen, what do we estimate those different types of bridges are going to cost? So we'll have those updates to our original staff-generated estimates. Then selection is made, presumably we'll continue. We get on through design, 50%, 90% design, 95, ultimately to 100% design package. And while we're doing that, they are updating their estimate. They're giving us a detailed estimate that says, okay, here's the amount of concrete involved, or here's the cost of a precast arch if that's what we're doing. Here's the cost of foundation work, the asphalt work. All those line items are estimated. So we end up with an engineer's estimate for the bid process. And at that time, again, we'll have kind of a check-in, if you will, that says, okay, this number is within expectations, or no, what's up here. Mm-hmm. And so then that's that opportunity again to look at it and say, okay, do we need to do something different? Do we just proceed? What is the answer? So I think there are several times along the way where that kind of an assessment of how we're doing budget-wise comes into play.
Thank you.
You have another question?
I do. The older work task order for the land surveying and geotechnical work, what was the amount, and is that part of this $580,000?
It is. It was task order number 3. Part of what we have with our general services agreements is we've been able to process the small task orders through an administrative process for the most part. I don't remember the specific dollar amount on that one. I think it was 12,000, I believe, was the figure for and that was for the geotech work and the survey work. And we processed that one separately simply because of the timing involved, and we needed to make sure we got out there before it started snowing on us to get the survey work and those kind of things underway. Mm-hmm. That is, I believe, generally coming out of this same overall budget.
Oh, that's included in this 122?
Not this 122.
Okay.
That 12 out of the 580.
So with the contract with them includes the 12, which that portion would be completed, that task order before the.
They will overlap a bit,
today.
but yes,
Okay.
they both be happening this fall, this winter.
Okay. Everybody understand? We've got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve the task order for design and construction management services with Keller and Associates in an amount not to exceed $123,880. I'll start the roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you, Les.